This episode of the WP Builds podcast is brought to you by GoDaddy Pro, the home of managed WordPress hosting that includes free domain, SSL, and 24/7 support. Bundle that with the Hub by GoDaddy Pro to unlock more free benefits to manage multiple sites in one place, invoice clients, and get 30% off new purchases. Find out more at go.me/WP Builds. And by Bluehost. Redefine your web hosting experience with Bluehost Cloud. Managed WordPress hosting that comes with lightning fast websites, 100% network uptime, and 24/7 priority support. With Bluehost Cloud, the possibilities are out of this world. Experience it today at bluehost.com/cloud.
Hello there, welcome to a brand new show. Well, kind of brand new. We'll explain about that in a moment, but we're calling it You and I. You know, you and I.
We're
But
so
also,
clever.
I know, we're very proud of ourselves. But also UI, user interface, which is something that Piccia Neri, who's over there, is a bit of an expert on. We had a show which we called the UI and the UX show. And we've been running that on and off for a long time, several years. And we were a bit sporadic with it. So we've decided to sort of tighten the ship up a little bit and give it a new lick of paint, a new design palette, and a new logo, which Peaches happily put together. And
It's been months I've spent on that logo.
really months,
so
yeah.
long.
Thank you so much. I think we both know that that's not true, but never mind. So the intention of this show really is to introduce UI, UX concepts. We're going to stray into all sorts of different topics over the months to come and be more regular about it, more serious about it, I guess, really is the intention. But first of all, if this is the first time that you're seeing a show like this with me and Piccia, I'm going to hand over to Piccia and just let her introduce herself. Piccia, over to you.
Yes. Hello, Nathan.
Hi.
Thank you so much for having me yet again. It's very nice to be here. So I am a designer mainly. I started as a book designer, which I tell you is so great. I just did a book for an artist, actually, literally done it yesterday. And it was so quick and easy and nothing moves.
Yes.
You design something and it stays like that. You don't have to design it consider all the, but yes, apart from that, so I started as a book designer a long time ago and then sort of gradually progressed through creative design and image making, and then ended up somehow into WordPress, which is why we're here.
Yeah.
And that's how I started learning about how to design online, which is a completely different kettle of fish, like I said, way more treacherous. And for instance, one of the things that I considered a bit, because obviously you do consider accessibility even when you are a book designer, because you need to make sure that your text is readable. You use the right type size and inks and so on, but it wasn't a major concern. Now that I've been designing online for I guess I can say a long time, I always feel I'm new to online digital design. Like, no, not me. No. I think I started like around 2010. That's 14 years ago. So I have now gained considerable experience with it. And now accessibility is my major concern. And so that's who I am, really. I am a UX and UI designer. I always maintain that I do both. There are certain gatekeepers that say that you can't be a UX and a UI designer as well. But honestly, it's not rocket science. I started by doing interfaces because basically, if you design books and magazines and film posters, you're creating interfaces. And I can understand UX because UX is all based on research. And that's something I've always done as a designer. So the two things go very well together, plus accessibility, which has become my concern in the past few years. And that's why we decided to make it the topic of this first show of the new era.
Yeah.
With the new name and everything, and the new
that's
logo
right.
and the new palette.
Yeah. So this is going to be our first show. I'll just give you a hint of the kind of things that we might cover in the future, because Piccia's mapped out a bunch of different titles, and that'll give you a flavor of what's to come, and whether or not you wish to subscribe and so on. But we're going to be covering accessibility today, like Piccia said. Then we'll be moving on to things like inclusion, accessibility, and usability principles. Then laws and regulations, which impact accessibility. Technology in accessibility will be another topic. And then sustainability, which is really close to my heart. I love that subject. Accessibility audits and user testing will be another one. Design systems and accessibility, that's a maybe, I think. And then accessibility beyond visual design. And the ones that Piccia's finished mapping out for now will end with future trends in UI, UX, and accessibility. We're not saying that's exactly what we will do, but for now, that gives you an inkling of the kind of things. So it's shot through with accessibility, basically.
Yeah, shot through with accessibility. I wouldn't call it's probably not going to be an accessibility show per se, but it will definitely be UX and UI always from the accessibility angle, because basically anything that we make sure that it's as accessible as possible. Can it be perfectly accessible? No, that doesn't exist. Why? Because we all have different needs, and therefore you can't address all of them at the same time.
Right.
But you can make accommodations.
Okay. So we're going to be talking about the accessibility opportunity.
Yes.
Would it be a good idea to share your screen at this point? Do you want me to do that?
I think that we can. I'll let you know in a
Okay.
minute. I don't think quite yet. What I want to say first is explain just briefly why accessibility, because I mean we have said it, but why is accessibility so essential? Because accessibility is UX, and it's a UX is user experience. Okay, so basically you want to give people a good experience when they land on your website, on your product, or use your product. If they can't use it, they can't have an experience.
Well, that's
and
a good
many
point,
more
yeah.
people, it's a good point, isn't it? And many more people than you think will need for you to have considered their situation. Because what we tend to do, and I definitely was, and sometimes still am one of those people, even though I do my best, is that we always create something considering our point of view. It's human, it's normal, it's absolutely normal. So what accessibility does is it gives you a wider perspective. It makes you more open-minded. So that's why the title of this episode is the accessibility opportunity, because really a lot of people consider it a limitation or a pain in the rear end, because it forces you to consider, to consider many more things that you would have done than you would have done. But the thing is that it really is an opportunity, and I think that that's the main focus of this episode, is to show that. Why is accessibility an opportunity? Because first of all, accessibility is essential for some people. Any accessibility feature will be indispensable, essential for some people, but usually it's useful for all. I can't really think of any accessibility feature that doesn't somehow benefit people who don't have that particular disability, but still find themselves using the feature.
Right.
Can you think of anything that's like that, Nathan?
No. I was trying to trip you up there, and whilst you were saying that, I was trying to think of something where it couldn't be used by somebody else. And the answer is there's probably just going to be a bit of an overlap in many cases, isn't there? People are sometimes entirely blind, but sometimes partially sighted. I might break my arm and be unable to use my mouse in the same way that I could use yesterday. And so suddenly I stray into needing some accessibility criteria, which I didn't before. What I'm trying to sort of say is I think it's a bit of a spectrum, isn't it? And the idea that it's, switched on for, I don't know, let's say blind people and blind people only is a bit of a misnomer. There's so many different categories and subcategories. And like you say, if you just do your best to satisfy as many as you can, that's probably going to reap the best results. And people might stray into accessibility, stray out of it as time goes on. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, that's a really good point that you're making, because funnily enough, I was talking last week to a client who I did, they have a product and I did an audit for them. I don't do just accessibility audits because that's a different kettle of fish, but I do UX and UI audits that focus very much on accessibility because actually good design usually is accessible, and we'll get to that. Anyway, they then, after my audit, they decided they rebuilt all their standards, and they've asked me to check their standards. And the first thing that I said was, all of the features that you mentioned are great, but they only help blind people, which is great. But there are so many other categories that you have to bear in mind. It's not just that. And it ends up often being identified as just that, but it isn't. And I hope that over the course of the conversation, we can show that. But
Nice.
I really want to talk about what I mean with the accessibility opportunity. Basically, around a rough estimate is that around 25% of the whole of the world population is experiencing some form of disability, whether permanent or not, or temporary. As you were saying, you could have a broken arm, or you could be the feature that is essential for some but beneficial for all. For me, is captions.
Right. Okay.
I can't live without captions, and I can hear fairly well. Now, my niece is living with me at the moment, and she kind of thinks that my TV volume is way too high, which makes me laugh because I remember my parents being like that. So maybe, but however, I can hear, but I just use captions. They aid my cognition, and I use them in any language. And the funny thing is that, for instance, I'm watching a French show that I love, and usually I was watching the French show with English captions. And now the other day, I felt really brave, and I put the French captions on. And I felt, oh my God, now I'm learning so much more because I'm actually not just then checking I'm remembering the expressions much more.
Right.
So
Right.
even for language, this is another example for language learning. Not only does it aid cognition, but for language learning, captions are fantastic. Or if you're not a native speaker of any language, the captions are going to be amazing, even if you use them in the same language. So digression.
No, not really. And
Yes.
it's interesting because we run I say we, not you and I. See what I did there? I, with another person called Anshin, run a
I
summit,
love
and we
ancient.
get lots of comments, and we spend a lot of time making sure that our captions are correct, and we get exactly the same commentary. A lot of people just choose to have it on in the background. They can't concentrate with noise, but they like to just sort of glance over and see what's going on, and they can just read what's happening at the same time. So the idea that accessibility is an opportunity, not a limitation. In other words, you don't have to have captions just because somebody is deaf. There are other
Exactly.
there are other people who will benefit from that option that you gave, even though they may not, in air quotes, need it.
Or for instance, transcripts, which
Right.
are also there are 3 levels of digital accessibility requirements: A, AA, and AAA. AAA is hardly ever required unless you're a specific type of organization. But captions and transcriptions are actually A, like 1A. It's like basic accessibility. But when I do a meeting, for instance, or an audit, I always transcribe it, because even if you do a meeting and then you don't have to do anything, you just upload it somewhere. There are so many tools that do it even for free now. I think Google Docs even does it. You transcribe it, and then if people need to remember something about the meeting, they don't need to email you. They can just do a word search in the
Right.
transcript.
Yeah.
So that's another accessibility feature that's incredibly useful. But let's go back to our main topic about the accessibility opportunity. And now, Nathan, we can bring up the screen, because
Okay.
I found one of many articles. Because actually, another thing that I want to do accessibly is, as much as possible, I want to make sure that whoever watches or listens to this can understand what we're talking about, even if at that moment, for any reason, they can't see what's going on in the screen. This is something that I've actually started doing when I do talks. When I do talks on stage at a conference, I always script my talk carefully so that if you were to listen to it without any images, you'd be absolutely fine. Sometimes,
nice.
yeah, this is something. A Bud Krause, do you know him?
No, I mean I've met him several times. I don't know him particularly well, but yes,
Bud Krause is great. He's a WordPress institution in the US, and I think he's legally blind, and that's who he pointed that out to me. He said, for instance, an instructional videos that has music and only images. It's like, what do I do with that? I can't do anything with that.
Yeah.
Anyway, look, we digress a lot, don't we, Nathan?
No, it's
whenever
fine.
we do a show,
Yeah,
we digress so much. So this is one of the many articles that you can find on the return on investment of web accessibility. And I do not accept cookies, actually, but it is quite nice. See, this is also, it's an accessibility stroke usability feature. It's I accept or I don't accept, or settings. Accept and don't accept legally have to be as easy and as equally important. This is done very well. We like him already, Oliver. So, and I actually think that it has no contrast there. We're not going to go into this now. So Oliver Amberton just talks about, the summary is done very, very well. This is also accessibility, because accessibility is also about how content. We had a really long conversation about this, Nathan, on the podcast that we did about typography.
We did.
It starts from content. It's like there's an iceberg, and is the UI, and below the surface is all this. Look how well he's done this. So if you think that in the US, 61 million adults with disabilities, and in the UK, 14.1 million disabled people, and the number is increasing. So the spending power, he talks about the UK only right now, of families with at least one disabled person in the UK is estimated at 274 billion a year.
Gosh.
And that's just the UK. And I know that at some other point, yes, I have a free accessibility primer on my piccianeri.com website that you can find. And I think I did the research for that. The size of the disabled market globally is something as big as the China market, I think.
Yeah,
something
that's
like that.
just phenomenal.
It's crazy. Yeah. Why would you not want to see that as an opportunity? 71% of disabled people, and that's also me, and I'll show you how and where. I don't identify as disabled, but I have disabilities. Abandon websites that present access barriers. That's normal. You just do that, don't you? If someone shuts the door in your face, which is the equivalent,
the
digital equivalent, you just leave, don't you?
Yeah, I guess you would. Yeah.
And almost everyone experiences temporary or situational impairments, as we were mentioning earlier. Noise, poor lighting, distractions. That's why you would need captions, because if you're on a train, you want to watch a video. So, captions are my favorite thing. And 97.4% of the top 1 million websites in the world have clear accessibility issues. This is a report that this is called the WebAIM report. It's an accessibility organization that does a report every year, and I can click and show it to you. Actually, this would be a nice thing to look at. Is the top 1 million homepages based on which the Tranco ranking, which combines several sources of top websites. And so there's been a slight improvement from last year, but also a what's the opposite of improvement?
Degradation.
Degradation in other things. So so he had 97.8, was not quite. I thought so. So 95.9% at the moment. So this is the latest result. The point is, though, and I will demonstrate that in a minute, that a lot of web pages any automated system, which is how they test this, because 1 million is many pages, you would have to automate the testing. The automated tools don't actually, they only show about 30% of the issues.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm going to have a sip of coffee right now. It's a Typo 3 mug.
Oh, nice.
I've spoken at a few Typo 3 conferences, and look.
Mine's the periodic table of the elements.
Oh, wow, you're so clever. No, yeah. So this is really interesting, because if you look at the most common WCAG, WCAG, which is commonly pronounced as WCAG, are the guidelines. The Web Content Accessibility Guidelines is what the acronym stands for. So low contrast text, 81%. How easy is it to sort that out? Very, very easy. Missing alternative text for images is just lazy, and it's so basic and easy to do, especially in WordPress. Missing form input labels, also really easy to sort. 48.6% of pages have that. Empty links, that's just, again, it's not even lazy. It's like you forget about it, you don't do it properly. Empty buttons as well is a common feature. A missing document language. So addressing just these few types of issues would significantly improve accessibility across the web. So accessibility is not only is it an opportunity, it's also relatively easy to fix. Or you don't even have to make it perfect, because I will show you a website that shows how you can't make it perfect for everyone. And actually, should I do that now, given that otherwise I'll lose the train of thought?
Why not?
There's this. So blind. I've got it in the other.
You got it in
browser.
the document that you've got open.
It's not there, actually. I'll explain what it is briefly while I get the URL. Yeah, it's very easy. It's blind. Hold on that. So it's a search engine for it's a search engine for blind people. And it's really only usable by blind people, because I've brought it up on the page now, and it's a page that has no clear layout, huge amount of contrast errors. If I use the automated tool, it's got 33 contrast errors. And but a blind person using a screen reader absolutely loves it, because it's conceived for them. But it wouldn't work for someone else who uses the web visually or in another way, because I haven't tested it for keyboard or whatever, but it has to work for keyboard if it works for a screen reader. Normally, that's a yardstick. So I find it so interesting. Actually, you could do a whole other conversation about this, but it's such a blatant example of a website that is meant for a certain category and not for others.
Isn't that interesting? Because everything about it screams, from a design and just aesthetic point of view, it looks very quirky. It looks as if it was dragged out of the 1990s or something.
I know.
But it just goes to show that all of the bells and whistles that we've added since the 1990s probably haven't helped one bit for people who are navigating the web with screen readers. So that's genuinely fascinating. Blindhelp.net is the URL for that, if you want to go check it out.
Yes. Yes, it's very interesting. And I also, there's a whole other topic that's accessibility related, which is the relationship between accessibility and aesthetics, and accessibility and creativity.
Okay.
I have a talk about that, which was at UX Copenhagen in 2023. And I know that there was a talk at, I think, the WordPress Accessibility Days in 2022, perhaps, about how you can create a beautiful website that's accessible. The two things, because a lot of people say, yeah, but if I'm accessible, I can't be creative, or I can't do anything that's beautiful. And I think that's really, it's a myth that can be easily debunked. And I personally think that brutalist design can be beautiful. Brutalist design in web design is just literally HTML as it was meant to be, more or less.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
this Blind Hell project isn't quite, because this is it's the colors that make it really hard for me to read it. So there are so many conversations that can be made about that. But to me, the point is that I'm not sure that the web is the right place for creativity. And that's something I've had to learn, because I remember when I was starting designing websites as a designer, not as a WordPress user or as someone that had bothered understanding how the web works yet, I had huge rows with my developer friend. She was telling me, you can't do that. You can't do that. And I was like, what do you mean? But then it would look like shit. Why can't I have the typeface that I want? And I confess, I mean, I will say this now. I suggested using my favorite typeface as an image. I did this. I am confessing, and we're putting this out into the world. So that was many years ago, though, over 20 years ago. And then I informed myself, and I was like, ooh, okay, sorry, I get that now. But a lot of designers, though, they wouldn't do that probably these days, but they don't inform themselves enough. And you can always tell a website that was done by a creative designer, because it's usually unusable or inaccessible, which often is the same thing. And I really should have pulled one of those up, but it's because we're also improvising, aren't we? So you know what I do when I want a quick example of an unusable website that probably looks very beautiful? I go to the awards website.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
It's so easy. It literally, it's automatic. And maybe why don't we do that? It's gonna be fun. It never fails. I did it live at a conference, and it literally never fails. God, I've got so many. I need to quit Firefox, because otherwise I'll get very confused. Okay, here's the window.
That's it. You found it. You got it.
Awards. So this is the website.
It's 3 W's, right? AWWARDS. Have I got that right?
So yeah. So they haven't, see, for instance, here they haven't done it right, the cookies policy, because accept has center stage, whereas reject or should be just as visible. Already they've got a strip that I can't stop at the top, and that makes me sick. So so a very creative website. Visit site. Usually when it says a very creative website, it's an exact. There you go. Already it's got, this website is sloshseltzer.com. I am sure that it will look amazing and super creative, but is it gonna be accessible? Already I'm trying to use this. Nothing happens. Okay, I'm ready to party. Actually, for now it's not too bad. Ooh, there's an animation. There's a can floating in space, and if I move the mouse around, it animates. It's actually not too bad, because I can actually stop the animation. But I don't know. So if I click on it,
oh gosh, it's very clever, but it's also yeah.
No, mate, it ain't. How do I stop this now?
I don't think you do. I think you have to scroll away from it.
Probably people don't hear. Can you hear the music?
No, and I'm glad.
It's got music really loud.
Okay.
So okay, I'm gonna have to. I can't hear you anymore, or myself.
Yeah, get rid of this website quickly.
Loud. So once again, I have proven my theory that any of the websites that win awards are hardly usable and definitely inaccessible. That there was no way for me. I lost all agency. I definitely lost my sense of hearing, because the music was so loud. There was nowhere for me to stop it. So I find it hilarious. But was it beautiful and was it creative? Yes. We weren't going to. I mean, the colors were beautiful. The animation was beautiful. It was really clever. But the web is something that is meant to be interacted with. We go there to find information, to complete a task. We don't go there to be entertained, or if we do, then it's a different kettle of fish entirely. And then it should be in the same, considered as a medium in the same guise of a, video.
Yeah,
And
like
sometimes
you go
I
to
often
YouTube
think,
to be entertained, or yeah, I get it. Yeah.
exactly. So my point being, it's two different things. If you're creating a website, usually it's a tool for someone to get something done, or even for you to advertise your product. But you've sent me away, so you haven't really advertised it, because I had to run away from their website. So not quite. So back to accessibility as an opportunity. We were on that website that I think we lost it because we went, it's here,
There you
it's
go. You were
back
there.
from
You were
here.
there last time.
So
That's it.
we could go into more detail with that, but really just trust the numbers. It's a huge market. So you've got that. And I always lead with that. But I now also have to add that in Europe, there's already the European Accessibility Act that will come into full force. So it will be enforceable as of the 28th of June, 2025. And that act makes you liable even if you're not a public organization or if you're just a business. I think only micro businesses are excluded. So
Okay.
micro business, I think, is below. But don't take my word for it. I am preparing on it, though, because I am speaking at Hatch conference in Berlin in early September talking about this. But the point that I'm going to make at that conference is like, yes, you need to be aware of the legal implications. But why would you want to be a dick in the first place? Because also, a lot of the WCAG guidelines, I mean, let's say, even if you are legally compliant and implement all of the WCAG guidelines, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are accessible, because the WCAG guidelines do not cover everything. There's lots of stuff that they don't cover. So trust me and trust the numbers and start thinking of accessibility as an opportunity. So what's one of the companies that makes more money in the entire world, Nathan?
Oh, Apple.
There you go. Of course, it's Apple. And Apple is a really good example. So this article is actually hilarious, and I'm about to show you. So Apple is a really good example of a company that has invested a lot into accessibility. And do they make money? Yes. Yes, they do. They make a lot of money. So is accessibility profitable? Well, clearly it is. Now, this site, hilariously, is called The Verge, and their manage your data that comes up is evil, because it forces me to manually toggle off all their all the cookies that I don't want, all the stuff that I don't want. I'm forced to manually turn it off, which is evil. Do not ever do that, please. Usually I would just move on, just not do this. Yeah, so finally, 5 minutes later, there you go. Now confirm choices. Now, this article is about the new accessibility features from Apple that let you control an iPhone or an iPad with your eyes, which is amazing. And funny enough, it talks about, look at the URL. It mentions motion sickness accessibility features. Now, I have a vestibular disorder. Any animation that I can't stop, such as the GIF that is now on the top of the page, and lower down, even if I try and move away from it, I've got two now. Any animation that I can't stop, I am literally already sick, and I'm not even exaggerating. I cannot be on this page. I have to move down. So that's hilarious. I find it hilarious. But anyway, this is a very recent article. We're recording early June 2024, and this is May 15th, 2024. So, if you do any research, I mean, there are so many features that Apple has that are accessible. Let's start from VoiceOver, which is a screen reader that's built into the Apple iOS that tells you exactly what's happening on the device. So you know what's on the screen and you can select the commands. Then they have a magnifier that uses the camera, and it increases the size of anything that you point at. So even if you're trying to read, the evil labels in a supermarket that you can't read, you can use that. So it's actually kind of augmented reality. That's a wonderful feature. Siri and dictation, sound recognition. I mean, that works even too well because I've sometimes used it, and we were saying earlier, Nathan, how we speak by ourselves. I do that a lot.
Yeah,
And
I do.
Are responding to me like, no, I wasn't talking to you. And but Google as well has done a lot. I mean, I remember when my dad, he was 90 when he died, and he was doing all his research on his ailment, and he would just you would know he'd be like, okay Google. At the time, it was the command of an Android phone would be okay Google, and he'd just have long conversations with Google and finding out everything that he needed to find out. It was amazing. He was just like, and it's an accessibility feature, but he wasn't, therefore he had all his faculties, and he had, he could have, but that's the way he preferred to interact with the web.
Yeah, nice.
So that's another accessibility feature, that because Google also does a lot. Now, what I want to address is that maybe people listening or to this or watching it may be thinking, well, but these companies have a lot of money. Of course they can do this. But my point is, and I think we showed it earlier when we were looking at the Web Million main errors, it doesn't cost that much to start on the right foot. And you know what you need to do, Nathan, to start on right foot? Where to start from?
I don't actually know. No.
You do. You do, but I'll remind you. Is you start from HTML structure.
Oh, sorry. Yes. Yeah. Get
It's
the DOM right. Yeah. Yeah.
It's the brutalist design, and that's, if you get the HTML structure correctly, then everything else is gonna become so much easier, and you will have an accessible structure for your website. And so that's when I say start from content or start from typography, that's what I mean. I mean, I'm soon doing a masterclass in that, because I really firmly believe that if you get started from typography, it will be, everything about accessibility will be much less overwhelming, because that you've got the fundamental structure in place, and everything else is built on top, and you start from an accessible foundation.
Yeah.
Foundation is.
So you're talking there about the sort of structure of, so put the H1 and then any other H's nested below it, and nest things correctly, use articles and what have you. Just
exactly
choose your HTML appropriately and put things in the right place. Yeah,
exactly. And I find it amazing how helpful it is to actually make me consider what I want to say and where I want people to go. It's an incredibly useful cognitive device help to content creation, in my opinion, if you start doing it like that properly. And I'm told it's also really good for SEO, I think. I think you probably know more about SEO than I do, Nathan, but
I don't know a lot, but maybe.
yeah, that's what they say. So on the more on the ROI, that's because, and also expanding the concept of accessibility, because we're talking about digital accessibility in general. But the thing is that if you, as a company, even as a small company, lead with accessibility and disability inclusion, which is not, so see, I'm now on an Accenture page talking about companies that lead in disability inclusion outperform peers financially according to their research. Their cookie settings is not as good because it forces me, oh God, it's one of the evil ones. Confirm my choices, and I don't know what is evil.
A billion choices.
I won't describe it in that wasn't good. Anyway, they have done a super interesting report on both. It covers two things. It covers accessible digital accessibility, but also disability inclusion champions, which means companies that make it their business to accommodate disabilities or disabled employees, and what they need to have a better experience at work. And they outperform companies that don't do this disability inclusion by 1.6 times more revenue, 2.6 times more net income, and 2 times more economic profit.
Wow.
It's staggering. It's absolutely staggering. So funnily enough, the report is actually a PDF that you can download. No, it's not the, sorry, it's not quite here, but it's, maybe it's below. And PDFs are by their own nature not quite accessible. So that's interesting. But when you start thinking accessibility first, suddenly you really focus on the things that matter. And you realize that sometimes we all do things that are not accessible and we don't realize that. And I find that extremely interesting because then you realize that it really covers everything. Because I was telling you about the client who is a form plugin builder,
Yes.
who told me that they are subsequent to my audit, they've built new standards and they build their form, their tool accessibly according to certain standards. But what I told them, and I said already that I told them, yeah, you're only covering one side of it though, which is for screen readers mostly and keyboard accessibility. So people that use assistive technology that can't use a mouse, for instance, rely on semantic HTML and on to do proper keyboard navigation. There's more to it than that, but let's leave it at this for now. But the point is that especially with something like forms, you need to take into consideration also the questions that you're asking, the visuals of it, where you put your labels is very important, and also how you ask your questions, because you could be non-inclusive and therefore inaccessible even just with the questions that you're asking. And actually, I find forms and surveys really, really fascinating for that reason. Did you ever stop thinking about that, Nathan?
No.
Did you ever stop to think about that, rather?
No, I do know what you mean.
Consider that?
You mean the accessibility of forms? The only bit of forms that I know about in terms of accessibility is when any of the content is held within the field itself. So you often go to a form field and the information that the person gathering the form wants to give you is inside the field, and you click in the field and it immediately goes away. So somebody, for example, with a screen reader can't make use of that. But also things like the labels being above the form field and not beneath the form field.
They always need to be above.
Yeah, so that you've got that flow, so that you can tab through it. And yeah.
And also because a screen reader will announce the label. If the label is below the field, then the screen reader doesn't know what the field is for. So that's
I also
why
would imagine that when you've got
above.
conditional logic in forms as well, that could present problems. And also when you've got multi-page forms, the ability to know that you've, I guess, gone from this first section to this second section, and then how do you get back to the first section if you figure that you need to make an amendment or what have you. Yeah, I imagine forms are full of dangers and fraught with things that can go wrong. Yeah, okay, yeah.
Rife. It's just like a minefield. But at the same time, I don't want to exaggerate with that, because it really, once you educate yourself and you know the standards, it's not that hard. But with something like forms, if, for instance, things like required fields, people are so required happy, and they always make a field required. And it's like, yeah, but have you actually stopped to consider whether you're excluding someone like this? Because if you make a field required, but only a certain category of people can answer it, what do you need it to be required, or could you have formulated your question in a different way? It happened to me recently with a survey that was absolutely chock-a-block, because I actually asked, is this survey for me as well? Is my category included? Because it sounds as if you only want to talk to people who are in employment right now. They said, no, we want the freelance point of view for sure. And because I said, maybe I don't have a job precisely because of
Right.
you
Yeah.
try to
You're not
tackle.
employed directly. Yeah. Yeah.
But the first question was required, and it's like it was a question that only those in employment could answer, and it was the whole survey was like that. So I found it really, it was like very, very hard to answer. And there are things that people, like for instance, if you need a name in a form, Nathan, what do you ask for? What kind of field do you
I
put
would
there?
typically write name and have it in one field,
Good.
or I might have it as first name one field, last name second field.
Okay.
If that's what is that what you mean? Is that what the
It's
question? Yeah.
exactly, yeah, that was exactly my question. But the thing is that the first one is good. So
Yeah.
having just one field for the name, but
Just
the
whatever you
second
want to
one,
put. Yeah. Yeah.
whatever, is not good because not all cultures have a last name.
Right.
So
Interesting.
many, like
Yeah.
Iceland, they don't have a last name.
I think a lot
Indonesian
of
culture,
that is done to map to CRM applications, if you know what I mean. So they want to be
I
able to
know.
map the first name so that they can then, I don't know, email it and say, "Hi, Nathan."
Exactly.
Not "Hi, Nathan Wrigley," or whatever it might be. I think that's done for the convenience of the person running
I know
the.
exactly, but
Yeah.
it's not, you're not taking your users into consideration, you're taking your marketing needs into consideration. And actually, I found out yesterday that I only ask, I have one field in my forms, but my if people just put one name in there, then the CRM automatically duplicates it.
Oh, okay.
And I'm
Okay.
like,
Yeah.
no, 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 please don't do that. So I need to speak to them and say, look, you're not doing this accessibly. It's not right. It's just basically wrong. So there are so many things like this that people take for granted and they don't stop and think that maybe that question shouldn't be required. And that's why forms is a whole. And actually, I follow a guy who's called, I think he's called Adam Silver. He works for the UK government.
Oh,
And
okay.
and he is fixated with forms, and basically anything that you learn about forms will serve you immensely for good UX in general. It's extraordinary.
Hmm.
And so he always comes up with such interesting tidbits that are specific about forms. But when you think about it, I have had recently to use, even though I haven't lived in the UK for 8 years, but I still have, stuff over there. And the UK Gov website is amazing. It's
Yeah, I
so
think a
easy to
lot of
use.
effort has been put into that site, actually.
Oh my
Yeah.
God. It's extraordinary. I found myself in a bit of a loop at some point, but nothing is perfect. But in general, it's just so clear, so easy to use. And so obviously you listen to someone who has that kind of experience. So I think that we've sort of made a good case for the two main things. I'm
Uh-huh.
waving my fingers.
Yeah, it's all
I
right.
can't.
Yeah. Yeah. Your fingers
I
in the
think
air.
it's
Two fingers.
mirroring
Yeah.
me, so I never know when
Yeah.
my.
Yeah. Yeah.
So mainly accessibility as an opportunity. What is the main point? And then also accessibility is not that hard, and you don't need to be perfect. Basically, is
So it's
what.
it's an opportunity, and it will increasingly be a compulsion under law, certainly in the EU. But also, don't regard it as the kind of like the last thing which you'll do, because it's a bit of an edge case. Nobody really is asking for this and what have you. You're saying exactly the opposite. Begin there,
Exactly.
because it's not only is it going to be required, but it's also profitable. And you can see that, the likes of Apple that you mentioned are making great efforts to make their devices profitable, because they know that they can shift more units if they make things like that. But also the data on the links that you put up onto the screen demonstrates just the wealth of money. What did you say? Something like
Yes.
270 billion is the value of the spend of people in the UK with accessibility needs. And that's that's quite a lot of money
It's
that you're
quite a lot of
leaving on
money.
the table.
And
Yeah.
actually, as a closing example, I want to talk about something quite extraordinary, which is the Tesco case. So
Hmm.
Tesco in around 2001 made, I looked for the sources, I can't, but I mean, it's a very famous case, that they rehauled their website to be accessible, and they saw an ROI of 37,000%.
Gosh.
And that is a thing. It was extraordinary.
So Tesco is a UK supermarket. And
Tesco is a UK
yeah, and
supermarket.
they shift a lot of product, not just in the physical store, but they shift a lot of product. They've got a very successful web presence. And so, okay, let's imagine then that they go on.
Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No. I was just going to say, so imagine the reach of a company on that scale, truly enormous. So if they invest $1 million in making the website accessible, and they can shift, like 37 million pounds worth of stock on the basis of that is a no-brainer. Would you like me to put the screen back up? I think you've got something there.
Yes, because then what we did is it was 2022. We did this panel with Lazar, who's he's blind from birth, and he's using Lazar Bulatovic is his name. He's an accessibility tester, and he
I saw this presentation. It was good.
Yes. So basically, we were completely it was meant to be off the cuff, because we wanted for people to have a real life experience of what it's like to try and make a purchase on the internet when you are a blind person relying on your screen reader. So we thought we'd use Tesco, because we thought, okay, they did so well, they made their website accessible, and they made so much money. And it was hilarious, because then Lazar, it was completely impossible for him.
Oh, he got stuck in a slider, didn't he?
He got stuck, and look, the slider is still there,
and he couldn't get out of it. There was no way for him to.
No way, he couldn't, because of they're doing the focus wrongly. I don't know if they've corrected that. I haven't tested that, but also the slider is now the commands on this slider are actually, I think they're done correctly. I don't have the tab navigation ability on this browser, I don't think. But the point of the slider is that, why have a slider? Make up your mind. It's like, also all the elements of this slider have nothing. They have nothing in common. And it's like Pride, it's like Father's Day. And I understand that it's big store that's selling loads of things, but you've got so much anyway. Why would you do that? It was impossible for him to get past this.
Yeah,
and he was like,
quite
no way
to watch, wasn't it, actually? But
oh my God,
even
it was
the likes
painful.
of Tesco, who did something, they then stumbled. So it's an ongoing journey.
It's an ongoing journey, and we have no idea what happened there, because I tagged them in a LinkedIn post, but unsurprisingly they didn't answer. So but the thing is that, how do they know whether he was going to buy something huge? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whether he was going to be like thousands of pounds or euros, rather than your weekly grocery shopping. He was effectively forced out of shopping at Tesco. That is terrible.
Yeah, not good.
Okay,
I'll take the screen back off, if that's okay.
Yes.
Okay. I guess, looking at the bits and the pieces that you've got in our shared show notes, you're happy to call that a wrap, would you say?
I hope we've made our case, don't you, Nathan?
I think so.
What do you think?
So Piccia's making the point that, it's an opportunity. It's called the accessibility opportunity. And hopefully Piccia's managed to make that. We'll be back in a future episode. Don't know the exact date just yet, but the intention at this point, at least anyway, is to talk about inclusion, accessibility, usability principles. We'll see if that maintains its second place position. Maybe something else will get into the road first. But we'll see you in a few weeks, Piccia.
I can't wait, Nathan. Thank you so much.
You're very, very welcome. Have a nice day. Take it easy.
And you. Bye.
Bye.